Hi, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about run-on sentences. Run-on sentences are the most common major error in English language, and they're all over the place. So if you can reduce the number of run-ons, that'll be a big plus in your writing. So what is a run-on? So first of all, it goes by other names depending on what your teacher's going to use. Fused sentences might be another term. Comma splice is another. Run-on, I'll be calling them run-ons or run-on sentences. A run-on does not mean that the sentence is too long. You could have some sentences that are not run-on sentences that go a full page. It's probably too long, but it's not really a run-on necessarily. And you can have run-ons that can actually be very short. So run-on's not determined by the length. It's determined by the grammatical structure. It's, in essence, two complete sentences without a period or a proper connector in between. That's the definition. So as example, number one, Bill is not crazy, he's just a little eccentric. Bill is not crazy. That's an independent clause. You have a subject, you have a verb. It's a complete sentence, actually. He is just a little eccentric. That's also a complete sentence. You have a subject, you have a verb. That's complete. It's got a comma in between. It's supposed to have a period, or you could have a connector word. I'll show you how that's done. That's a run-on. There was a lot of traffic. That's a complete sentence. I was late for work. Another independent clause, another complete sentence. No period in between. That's also a run-on. So whether it's a comma or nothing in between is really irrelevant. They're both run-on sentences. You'll notice that these run-ons are conceptually related. In other words, Bill's not crazy, he's just a little eccentric. Those are really connected in meaning. They go together. I totally agree. They go together in meaning, but grammatically they're separate. So this is when run-ons occur, when you've got a couple different complete sentences that are really closely connected in their meaning, but grammatically they need to be separated. That's when we make run-ons. There was a lot of traffic, I was late for work. Those are really closely connected in meaning. There's a real tight relationship there. But grammatically, they're separate. That's a classic case when we're going to see a run-on. So how do you fix run-ons? There are really four ways to fix it. First is just to put a period in between the two independent clauses or the two sentences. Bill's not crazy, period. He's just a little eccentric. There was a lot of traffic, period. I was late for work. The problem with just putting a period every time is your sentences are going to be pretty choppy if that's what you do every time you finish an independent clause. So there might be better solutions sometimes. Sometimes this is fine, but other times not. You can use a semicolon here. If the two sentences are really closely connected in meaning, you can use a semicolon. A semicolon is your little dot with a comma sign under it. That's called a semicolon. And we use these when you've got two complete sentences. Have to be two complete sentences to use these. So they're like a period, really. But they also tell the reader, hey, don't stop here. I've got more information coming. So Bill's not crazy. I got my semicolon saying, hey, keep going. Okay, I know it's grammatically separated, but keep going because I've got a little explanation to go. He is just a little eccentric. There was a lot of traffic. Hey, keep going. I was late for work. That's what these semicolons tell you. They tell you it's complete. They're grammatically separated, but they're really connected in meaning. All right. By the way, I have a lot of students who try using these semicolons, and oh my God, I see a lot of errors with it. So if you're having trouble with it, you're not sure how to use it, just stay away from them. But if you get the hang of them, they could be really useful. They really show, they reduce some of the choppiness that you would get with just using periods. So that's technique number one, a period or semicolon in between. Second solution is to use an independent clause. That's your first sentence, then the comma, then what we call fanboys, and then an independent clause. Fanboys is a term I use for coordinating conjunctions. So it's these words, for and nor, there's your fan, but or yet so, there's your boys. All right. So if I have something like, I was late for work, comma, for there was a lot of traffic. Here, for is used a little differently than we often use it. It's kind of formal sounding. It means because. In that sense, we can use a comma there to connect those. That's a perfectly good sentence. There was a lot of traffic, comma, and I was late for work. There was a lot of traffic, comma, so I was late for work. So the nice thing about these, especially the word for or so in this case, is they show the cause and effect relationship. Whereas if I just put a period in between there, it would not show that relationship. Very important to show relationships to your readers. So those are really nice techniques. Again, if you're always using these fanboys, it gets really monotonous. So it's fortunately, we've got some other techniques to use. Dependent clauses, we've talked about those before. And you can change one of the dependent clauses into independent clauses to a dependent clause by adding a dependent word. So this is your list of dependent words. You should have a list there in Canvas. Take the time to read this if you're unfamiliar with these, but these kind of words can be used to connect your sentences. So if you need to pause the video at any time and review the lists of words, you should go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I'm going to move on and give you an example. So the rule we use is dependent clause, comma, independent. So in other words, I put this word because at the beginning of this clause. There was a lot of traffic. I put the because at the end of it. Now I changed this to a dependent clause. So I've got a dependent clause, then a comma, and then an independent clause. I was late for work. Because there was a lot of traffic, comma, I was late for work. Great. Again, I'm showing the relationships between the ideas. This flows a lot better than just putting a period in there. It's very nice. The dependent clause can also come at the end, and typically there will be no comma in that case. I was late for work because there was a lot of traffic. Also a nice way to do this. All right, so that's the third way. First way is a period, second, fanboys, third, dependent clauses, and the fourth way is to use transitions. Again, if you need to pause this and review the list, these are a lot like the dependent words. This is where it gets a little confusing, and you have to basically learn the difference between these types of words, because a dependent clause connects them together with no period in between. Let's go back for a minute. If I put a period in here, if I put a period right here after traffic, then I'd have a fragment. I don't want to have a fragment. So with the dependent clauses, I have to connect it with a comma. With transitions, on the other hand, you'll notice I put a period in between. Or I can use a semicolon. So these words, or like therefore, the meaning is pretty similar to because. It shows a cause and effect relationship, but it's a different type of grammatical term. So the punctuation's different. This is why one of the best things I did in college, when I was presented with the list of dependent words, well, fanboys are easy to remember, right? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. There's the fan and the boys. I can remember that easily. I went home and I memorized dependent words. I memorized them one day, stuck in my head. I still know all my dependent words. I use them all the time. Well, I'm an English teacher, true, but I write all the time. Everybody who writes a lot may as well know these words. Then you know which term to use and which one isn't. A word like but or although, those have different punctuation from the word however. However is on our list here. That's going to require a period. So it pays to learn the difference between those types of words. So let me show you an example of what they look like here. There was a lot of traffic, period, therefore, comma, I was late for work. Classic way to use a transition. Use a period before the transition, then your transition, then a comma, and then your other independent clause. You have, with transitions, some alternatives for variations. So there was a lot of traffic, semicolon, therefore I was late for work. Semicolon works well too. I can also get fancy and a little artsy-fartsy here. There was a lot of traffic, period. I was, therefore, late for work. This therefore sticks in the middle, comma on both sides. Sounds a little fancy. I'm liking that. There was a lot of traffic, period. I was late for work, therefore. All right, throw that at the end with a little comma. That's another option. So these transitions have a little flexibility that you don't have with some of the other terms. All right, so here are 4 ways to fix a run-on. put a period in between or a semicolon, put a comma and a fanboys, use a dependent clause. Dependent clause can come before or after, and then, or use a period and a transition. You could also use a semicolon or some of these other fancy ways to do things. The key to managing run-ons and to avoiding run-ons is to distinguish the difference between grammar and meaning. When you proofread, it's important to look at your sentences as grammatical units rather than meaning units. In fact, when I proofread, I do it both ways. I read for meaning, and I focus on just the flow of the sentences and does everything make sense? I'm focusing on meaning. But then I also shift my focus and I say, I'm going to look just at the grammar. I'm going to look at all my independent clauses and dependent clauses and see, is everything complete? Am I making any run-ons? And if you take a look at these 5 sentences real quick, if you're looking just for meaning, they all look fine. I studied hard, unfortunately, I failed the test. I studied hard, but I failed the test. Studied hard, however, I failed the test. I failed the test even though I studied hard. Although I studied hard, I failed the test. They all sound fine meaning-wise, but they're not fine grammar-wise. And if you look at it from grammatical parts, some are correct and some are not. Part of this requires a kind of mentality called field independence. Field dependent thinking is, if you have field dependent thinking, you're looking at the whole forest. You're not looking at the individual trees. If you learn something, you learn the whole context. Maybe if you remember a concept, you remember not just the concept, but you remember where you were when you learned it, who you were with. The field dependent is looking at the whole context. And when we look at the whole meaning, that's typically kind of a field dependent orientation. Field independent means looking at the tree, not the forest, learning the concept regardless of who you were with and what other associations were there. And to be able to proofread for run-ons, it's important to have field independent thinking, to be able to analyze each of these as clauses, independent or dependent, and as connected with different types of connectors, fanboys, dependent, or transitions. You should pause the video here, see if you could make the corrections, and then I'll show you the answers. So number 1 should be a period. This would be like a transitional word, basically. So a period after hard, then unfortunately. Number 2 is correct. This is a fanboys, comma, that's perfect. Number 3 is definitely a classic transition. However, this one, a lot of people make mistakes with this one. A lot of people put commas before however. Should be a period, however, comma. Number 4 and number 5 are both dependent words, dependent clauses, and those are correct. The dependent clause can come at the end or at the beginning. All right, so work on this. Work on looking at the grammatical parts, not just the meaning, and that will help you with this. All right, good luck.